Good morning, or whatever time it might be where you're at. This is Kenny Povey with Gardening Simplified. For those who don't know, what I'm going to be doing today is we'll kind of give a little tour of the garden, but we're going to talk about your tomatoes and as they grow, what you need to do. What I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be tying up and keep adjusting these tomatoes that's in the baskets. I'll be tying the ones that are staked. Now I did actually find my plant tying tape, so I'll be using it a bunch. It's not biodegradable, like it doesn't rot away real quick. I'll be using jute twine too, but the tying tape sometimes is good, especially when you're tying up the stalk of your tomato, because if you get it a little too tight, your stalk still has room to grow and expand, as your plant gets bigger. When you're tying with jute, you always want to make sure that you leave it just a little bit loose, so you allow that extra. But we'll just set this stuff down here. And what I'm doing with these baskets, as you can see, as they grow up, they tend to want to grow out. And it's best to do this early in the morning because they're moisture, but just bring these leaves back in and encourage them to grow up the basket. You can take the other ones that's close to it and just lay them on top. But don't forget to watch your ones that's down here further now, because a lot of times when these leaves get big or these limbs start getting bigger, sometimes they're in the wrong place, and you want to pay attention while they're smaller, because you wouldn't want to try to raise it up when it's real big. But at the same time, while I'm in here, what I want to watch is for blight. Now, I said in earlier videos this year that I don't prune my tomato plants, and what I mean is, in the past I had pruned off the suckers. So a lot of people say prune off the suckers, but as you can see, I took off the lower leaves, but I leave the suckers. Now these small suckers, they'll end up growing into another plant, and it does make it harder to keep your plant in the cage. If you have it, it makes it a little harder when you're tying them, because when they get larger, you just need to tie them over to the pole. But what I'm going to do is, as these get bigger, I'm going to start taking off these lower limbs that's on here. Now, some of these suckers, like this one, is getting pretty good size. But what I'll do, once it gets up a little bit, I'm going to take off some of this lower foliage. And what that's going to do is allow a little more airflow. But two, the pruning is going to encourage the plant to grow more. And a lot of people say that the suckers take away from your plant. They draw on it. Yes, they do tend to cause a little bit of extra draw on your plant. But what that does is too, now this one has a sucker that's come up. It's really big, and if I can find the top of it here, it's just now, it's kind of hard to get those leaves out of the way, but it's just now starting to flower off in here. It's setting its flowers. And now this one here will have to be tied over. This, you got another sucker that's coming off over here. This one is just now starting to set its blooms to flower. These are indeterminates. You have another one down here that's coming on, and it's going to start setting flower. But I have the main stalk now. It's tied off, but what I'll do is, once these get big enough, I'll tie off the other. But what's happening is it keeps increasing the size of your main stalk. And as far as your stalk is going to get nice and large, and it's going to supply this whole plant. And if you don't overwater, if you allow your soil to dry some before you take and water it, your roots are going to go deeper. You're going to have a healthier root system, and you're going to end up with a healthier plant that's going to support all these suckers on here. You can see we've got little tomatoes. Of course, there's a lot of bigger ones on these plants too. This is my unknown variety, so I don't really know what this is, but it's definitely a hardy tomato. It doesn't set quite as early as my early girl bush, which this is kind of you can see how crazy it's going. And what I've done, I can talk about a little bit while we're out here too. I've actually put a bag on some of these flowers. Now these are F1 tomatoes, so they're not whatever seed it is that I protect and grow from it. They're not going to be the same as the parent, because it is a crossbred tomato plant. The same with all my tomatoes that I have this year. The early girl bush, it's not, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to still collect some seed from these, and these bags are actually protecting the flowers from bees, so they can't pollinate them. So whenever I'll just tap them when they open, and whenever they do set fruit, it'll be true to just this plant. But like I say, being these are hybrids or F1s, they're not stabilized like a lot of your older tomatoes. My mind's kind of slips a little bit here, but a lot of the open pollinators that are been around for a long time, like your beefsteak and different things like that, which for some are great tomatoes, but like I say, sometimes you can get a good tomato variety and collect your own seeds. But you can see, like this one, the limb is growing longer. I can catch it now early, and I can put it up over the basket. And what that'll do is let the basket support more of the weight of this limb. And when I put these limbs like this, it kind of keeps my plant towards in the basket. Now, we was over here looking at this one with the bag, but this one is actually in the cage next to it, and it grew out, and I just allowed it to come over into this cage. Now these cages are too small for these plants. These are sturdy plants. They've got real good root stock. In fact, some of my plants that are down here that haven't been tied, and I will be tying up more today, but some of them are up a good 18 inches to 2 feet, and they haven't been tied off because the stalks are so sturdy on them that they hold their own. But you don't want to push it too far, because when you do get winds coming in, they're going to take and knock these over. A good chance, especially when they get fruit, they're going to try to go over. This is one right here. You can see this is probably pretty close to 18 inches. Its stalk supporting it. Now it's got a sucker, and it's both sides are setting blooms. And people say, oh, we can't stake these. You want to do them single vine when you're staking, but you can still stake these. You just tie up each one individually and train them to come up. And it doesn't matter how many you have. The main thing is when they start putting on fruit, you know, start taking off some of those limbs that's shaded below, because they're not going to be doing much photosynthesis anymore. And always look for limbs that might have a problem, as far as if they start to looking like they have any blight, then you want to start taking those off. And I've trimmed quite a few already. You can see off in here, we've got some tomatoes that are going. As far as these are a little bit larger. Now this is a celebrity, so it doesn't really put on a giant tomato, and that's not so much what I want. I want a lot of tomatoes because I'm planning to can those this year, and I want them to come on and be ripe at the same time. I can't take a lot of the, and this is an indeterminate, but the celebrity acts a lot like a determinant at first. It puts on a whole lot of fruit, and then it'll ripen it up, but it'll continue to produce throughout the year. And this is a lot of tomatoes for one family, and I'm sure I'm going to have to find a home for a bunch of them. But we're sitting here, about, I think it's about the 27th of April, and I've got these in fairly early. Started all these from seed. But what I'll do, I'll come in here and I might do a little bit of pruning if I see it's necessary. Open up and air these a little bit more. But the main thing is to make sure that they're all healthy and that they're running up in the basket right. Because like I say, if you don't, they'll get crazy and get all over the place. And these will anyway, because as far as these baskets here, when you make them out of concrete mesh, and then I cut just a little bit off. These are probably about 4.5 foot tall, and of course these indeterminates, they might get 8 to 12 foot. Normally what happens is they run out the top of the basket, and then they run all the way down till they're at the ground. But at that time, if they get to a certain point, what I'll do is I'll top them so they're not too tall, and what that'll do is it'll encourage these suckers to grow more. It'll stop that from growing out there, but all these suckers that it's putting on will start making their tomatoes. So as far as I can still keep the height low, but I can still keep heavy production. As you can see, of course, it got a little later in the day. I've still got to come in here and clean up, but you can see all the lower limbs that I've trimmed off. A lot of the lower limbs, once they start getting holes in them, and if they look like there's any kind of problem with disease, you want to go ahead and get rid of them. And I usually, if I'm going to do this, I like to do it in the morning. That way, the plant has plenty of moisture in it. Sometimes, if it's really dry, I would want to water them good first. That way, because some of them's going to leak. You can see in some of my earlier videos. But these upper limbs on here, they're doing most of the photosynthesis. A lot of the lower ones, when they start to play out, I don't wait for them to start turning yellow or brown and dying. I go ahead and take them off and let it focus on growing on these top ones. And it seems that pruning them this way does real good for the plant. And like I say, these haven't had a lot of water. People tend to want to overwater, and they probably could use a little more water. I tend to look at my plants, and this is shaded in the morning, and I was wondering why they seem to do a little bigger up there. There's not a whole lot, but they seem to be a little bit bigger. And it's possibly because the shade keeps the sun off it longer, so it has just a little bit more moisture. You want to mulch around your plants. That does a couple of things. You mulch heavy, it keeps your weeds down. You're still going to get weeds, and especially depending on what type of mulch you have. Now for me, I have little weeds that come in here, but these things just pull right out. I mean, they're just, when they try to root in that mulch, they're just real easy. They just pull right out, and so it's easy to get rid of them. And what I'll do is I'll come back and now that I've got this all trimmed, I'll come back and weed this. But I figure I'd give the rest of the tour. Now we have our kale. It's kind of just staying there. Now this, I did run the sprinkler some. Usually I watered this quite a bit more, but I'm trying to do a lot less water, and I'm going to be building or actually changing the whole way that I garden. I'm going to do a little bit more of no-till method. I know this has all been tilled, but I'm working on some areas. Once I get more organic matter in my soil, I'll go ahead and I'll till it in, and then I'm going to kind of compact the soil, and then I'm going to go to a no-till method. I think it's going to produce healthier plants. It's going to be easier as far as a lot less water. Now here's the corn, which it's kind of hard to tell just from a video how tall it is, but it's probably getting up about 18 inches or so. Some of it is still smaller, and you can see. But in one of the earlier videos, we laid it by, and now it's starting to come on. It's supposed to rain tomorrow, or a possibility in the next day. So I'm not planning to water this, but what I'm going to do once it rains, I'm going to come back in with some more ammonia sulfate and lay this corn by again, because I want to get some height on it. And you can see that last batch of fertilizer, it's really increased the size. I haven't had to do too much weeding in here. And what I've done too is I've taken with the potatoes, and I've actually come in and used my compost mulch on these. I can't really call it compost. It does have a lot of composted material, but it's got a ways to go. Now I've been losing some of these potatoes, and this is to a fungus that attacks the stem. I'm sure that one's going to be lost, but it's just affected these Yukon Golds, and it's probably where the seed potatoes were grown. And that's gonna be one of the things whenever I'll save my own seed potato for next year, and so I won't have that problem. I'll take it from good healthy plants if any of them survive. But that's something you need to look at. Now there is a little bit of damage. I don't know what's been eating on the little holes in the leaves. Of course, there ain't a lot I can do. There's no potato bugs running around, but there are grasshoppers that's been out here and eating a little bit here and there. The purple hull peas, they're growing. They were put out early, and they're a little slow to grow. And the thing about these purple hull peas is that a lot of times they're put out kind of early, and what happens is when you seed too early, a lot of times I could maybe seed now and probably get even a better plant than what I've got there. And that's one of the things, when you seed early, a lot of times you don't get any better crop or so early crop. Now this row here, this is where I've tilled some of this compost, or my composting mulch, as I call it. But I've tilled this in, and I'm going to till another layer in, and then I'm going to pull this up into a raised bed, and then I'll come back and compost it. Now I'm using pine, this is pine limbs and bark and needles, so it's going to be a little more acidic. So what I'll do whenever I get ready to come back and compost, I'll go ahead and put some lime on it to adjust, because I know it's going to need some. The multiplying onions, of course the bees are still working on the flowers, but I've taken most of the tops off to collect seeds. And let's see, we'll go over here now. And I probably need to water this again. This bed needed more preparation last year. It needs some compost in it, and hopefully the supplier where I get some compost, I can go over there tomorrow. Hopefully this COVID-19 business, it's actually at some businesses that you think should be open for agriculture, which it says they're essential. A lot of them aren't, and they're hoping they'll be open tomorrow. But what I want to show, a lot of this, I planted my garlic whenever it was supposed to be, which it was in the time, but it was kind of at the early end of it, and a lot of it come off early. You can see some bare spots. Well, what I went back and did, I took, because I still had some garlic left from last year that we weren't going to eat, that were some of these hardneck varieties over here. So I went ahead and planted them. I was going to see, because we have such a long growing season, if they'll make into bulbs with cloves, or if it just be a single bulb. But we'll see that. I've got some more down here that is it's a soft neck variety, and now they're going to be a little bit slower to come up. I did put some compost in these two spots whenever I did this, but this was some of that junk you buy at Walmart it's really a poor compost. So it's got so much stuff that hadn't been broken down. But it'll work. It'll be better than what was in there. But that's where we're setting on that. Now we have the cucumbers here. We had the bigger one that come up first, and then some of the seeds didn't germinate, and so I come back and I planted some more seeds. Last year I had probably 125 foot at least rows of cucumbers, because I was pickling. I don't need any pickles. I still have plenty, so I'm just gonna do these few in here, and I'll leave these plants. There looks like there's probably 4 there. There's looks like 3 there, but I'll leave all those plants there. They might have a harder time fighting for nutrients, but and I'll probably give them a dose of some fertilizer to help them along. I haven't had to run the drip system much. Now I could run it, and I could really get these plants to coming on. These bell peppers, they're still small. You can see some of the leaves shredded up from the wind around here, and probably from putting covers on when they were smaller. Right here we have the little cherry tomatoes. If you look back at the videos, which this little one right here, it was really tiny, and I didn't even think it would live. Now these other ones, they had a hard time, but now they're coming they're coming out. They've got the roots starting. They're starting to set some blooms, and they are small, but they're in the ground, well rooted, and they're really picking up some size on them. And like I say, if I was dewatering, it would probably really increase the height of them. But understand too, whenever you water and you're forming your fruit is going to be less flavorful when you heavy water and heavy fertilize. You might make big fruit and it might make fruit quick, but it's going to be it's going to have less of a taste. Now we have the jalapeno peppers here, and they're starting. You can see down there they kind of getting pretty much loaded down, and they might be small as these plants are small, but they're steadily putting some size on. And I really have more plants than I need, so if I have a problem with losing them, it's the same way with tomatoes. If I have a problem with losing a few, it won't bother me because I have the space. But this year we're going to take and can up a bunch of these peppers. We buy a lot of nacho peppers, and we make feel kind of like a fresh sauce and stuff. We're definitely getting a good bunch of tomatoes coming on here, and even with pruning all these lower limbs, like I say, it's going to be a healthier plant taking care of it. They're really growing, they're really producing, and it shouldn't be long we'll have a good sized crop. But I hope you enjoyed the tour. We still haven't got anywhere on finishing up our expansion, all in a little bit of organic matter over here, and I'll turn it in. This was all woods and stuff, so it's got a lot of roots and things to take out, but it won't be long. We'll get the fence moved over after we get it pretty well cleaned up and get a bunch of this compost mulch worked in there. We'll let it rot on down and settle, and we'll go ahead and pull rows up for our raised bed. We'll do it more like a market garden, and then we'll just plant what we need to and go from there. In fact, a lot of it might end up just being fruit trees in there, and we won't have to worry about the deer because we'll have an 8-foot fence around it. But if you like this video, you want to see more, you want to be notified whenever the next one comes out, just hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, and if you like it, go ahead and hit like, and share it if you think it's got some content that might help some others.